Happy New Year, everybody. Yes, it's 2018, but there is still one final piece of business that we have to take care of from 2017, and that's talk about the best albums of the year. We've already done the worst. It's now time for us to talk about the 40 best albums that 2017 delivered to us. Now, yes, it's 40, it's not 50, it's not 25, it's not all the different options that we've spoken about, and there's a little bit of something different that's going on this year, considering there are a lot of albums that I've heard, but I didn't have the opportunity to do a review of. The only rule this year is that I had to have heard the album, so there's not going to be a big list of reviews for you to check out in the description box below. What there is going to be, however, is a place for you to pick up each and every one of these albums via the coverkillernation Amazon page. Just about any of these should be available over there, and you will help out the channel in the process if you decide to go that route. Great way to start your brand new year with some brand new music that perhaps you missed from last year. So let's stop dilly-dallying and dilly-dillying. Let's talk about the top 40 albums that 2017 had to offer, and we're going to start with number 40. Number 40 is Cradle of Filth's Cryptorania, The Seductiveness of Decay. Cradle actually sounds like old Cradle on this album, and it's really nice to hear. You can definitely tell that they put a lot of polish and care into this record, and as a result, it was one of the best of the year. Number 39, Warbringer, Woe to the Vanquished. Thrash metal had a pretty decent year this year, not as good as years past. However, Warbringer continues to establish themselves as one of the best. Number 38, Communic with Where Echoes Gather. This band comes back after a long layover and delivers a really solid album of progressive metal. These guys are great. If you guys like Nevermore, you're going to love Communic. Number 37, Shadow of Intent with Reclaimer. Yeah, deathcore actually had a bit of a spark this year and some brand new faces to do so. These guys are very young and definitely have a great career ahead of them. Number 36, Unleash the Archers. These guys are just really, really solid. They have great technical prowess to them, and they have a fantastic singer that has a wide range, and hey, isn't that bad looking to begin with. Number 35, Subterranean Masquerade with Vagabond. These journeymen return once again with a very strange and I guess, ethereal album that also includes a David Bowie cover right at the end of it that really sells this album. It's fantastic. If you've never scoped out these guys, you're really missing out. It's progressive and technical bliss. Number 34, we have Prospect with The Illuminated Sky. Another great progressive band that just continues to have their stock rise with each passing release. We talked about them a couple years back, and they ended up on the list that year. They are here once again, and they keep on going upward as their songwriting continues to improve. Number 33, Caligula's Horse with In Contact. Even though there was some strange decision-making on this album, this was still a phenomenal release from these prog rockers that once again show that progressive music moving forward has absolutely nothing to worry about. There's a lot of great names that are going to really take the torch from those long-standing veterans to show that prog has a great future, and these guys are wonderful. Just take a listen to one of the very first cuts off of this album, which is only 6 minutes, but it's amazing bliss, and then they have a long, long epic to end it, and it's wonderful. Number 32, Archspire with Relentless Mutation. Relentless is a great word to describe this album, and it's absolutely uncompromising. It doesn't give you very much room to breathe, and that's what makes it so darn good, is that it has a lot of endearing qualities that swirl around it and just absolutely pulverizes over you. Number 31, the Black Dahlia Murder with Nightbringers. While not as solid as some of the albums that we've gotten from them in the past, the Black Dahlia Murders still take a very short period of time to decimate through the week. And based off of that, based off of the fact that they really didn't overstay their welcome with this album, it definitely nets them this position on the list. Number 30, White Ward with Utility Report. This is one of the most interesting albums that you're going to find this year. It's avant-garde that has a little bit of just that sort of sludgy and really experimental quality to it. And Futility Report is certainly not a very good title for it. It's instead one that should be called Holy Crap, This is Intoxicating as Fuck. This is a great album, one that I highly recommend. If you need a brand new band, a brand new name that you've never heard of, White Ward should be your band. Or perhaps number 29, Cormorant with Diaspora. These guys, with just 4 tracks, are able to show, once again, that progressive music and death metal and just really great instrumentalization and overall just songwriting prowess is one that rewards a listener with every single thing that they hear from an album. And Diaspora is able to accomplish that. They have never made a 20 to 25 minute long track feel so engaging and endearing. This is the reason why this group, who has been around for a little bit of time, but is finally starting to get that much needed recognition. Certainly deserves it and more. Number 28, Power Trip with Nightmare Logic. For a lot of folks, they love this record and thought it was one of the best of the year, and it certainly fits that bill. This is thrash metal that has a lot of that new school charm to it, and I love the fact that it's kind of a Nightmare Fuel style album that delivers in every way. Number 27, Overkill with The Grinding Wheel. From a newer band to a absolute legend, The Grinding Wheel shows that Overkill still has the ability to deliver phenomenal thrash metal and still feel like they are growing a little bit and evolving in the process. They're not one that is staying with just the keep it simple, stupid attitude. Instead, they continue to find new tricks and new plays within their own style and their own craft and their own sound in order to feel fresh after all of these years. Number 26, Dying Fetus with Wrong One to Fuck With. Screw you, YouTube, for feeling that this is not advertiser friendly. This is more than just advertiser friendly. This is a really good album, and it's one that shows that Dying Fetus can be more than just uncompromising. They also can really write extremely well, and that destruction is something that whenever they harness it properly and just let it sort of go unbridled into the great sunset to destroy all in front of it, Dying Fetus becomes the band that you, well, actually really don't want to fuck with. Yeah, the title might seem a little bit edgy, and the whole entire packaging of it may seem a little bit, edgelord, oh, I'm trying too hard. But the album isn't trying too hard. The album is trying hard to actually impress the hell out of you, and the thing of it is that it actually works really well. Number 25, Aelstrom with No Grave But the Sea. Pirate metal, and I know I always say Aelstrom whenever it's Ailstorm, but hey, just humor me a little bit and have a little fun with it, you bunch of idiots. Jesus, do you have to be perfectionists all the time? You shouldn't, because these guys certainly aren't. This is one where they potentially were going to have a package where it was all done by dogs, and they actually did it, and it was actually really awesome. But the main album is fantastic also. Ailstorm is a band that just knows how to have a lot of fun with their music, but also still write very strong music. So they take the project seriously enough to really deliver a great product, but also are lighthearted enough to have a track like Fucked by an Anchor on it. That's not a lie. Number 24, Iced Earth with Incorruptible. Another solid band delivers another solid album. Should we really be surprised? Iced Earth has only been doing this ever since the early 1990s, but they've been through such a cavalcade of singers and different players that sometimes it's hard to believe that maybe this is a possibility. But it is certainly something that has happened. It is here, and this is a great album that you should certainly scope out if you haven't already. Number 23, Converge with The Dusk in Us. These long-term veterans are able to deliver another classic album, and they do so in a little bit of a different way. Instead of everything being really focused on the insanity, on thrusting you right into the destruction, they instead use a couple of lengthier tracks, including the title track itself, which really is using a lot more space and a lot more atmosphere and a lot more haunting eeriness to really deliver its message. And based off of that, The Dusk in Us feels like not only a complete album, but an album that really shows that Converge in the next couple of years or even to the next decade are still going to be a very powerful band that you're going to want to pay attention to. Number 22, Pain of Salvation, Within the Passing Light of Day. After a couple of albums that have been seen as middling and perhaps not as classic as some of their early discography, Pain of Salvation and Daniel Gillendow and Company deliver us that classic that perhaps we've been looking for in the 20-teens. This album is dense, it's layered, it's huge, and based off of that, it has a lot of those feelings that really are reminiscent from some of the band's earliest moments, while still keeping in some of those modern sensibilities. So instead of sacrificing where they were going to go back to a place where they were, instead they combine those two roads in order to forge a brand new highway, and that's what makes it a great album. Number 21, Boris with Deer. Once again, Boris is just one of the most unpredictable bands on the planet, and Deer certainly showcases this, and it shows them also as one of the best bands on the planet because of their ability to control their own chaos and make it all feel like it has meaning, like it deserves to be there, like it's supposed to be there, because it is supposed to be there, and it's extremely important in the process. Number 20, we have The Contortionist with Clairvoyant, and this is yet another album that these guys deliver that just feels so much bigger than it actually can sometimes be, and it's based around their ability to make something from nothing and make that nothing feel like it is massively important and is sort of changing the game. The Contortionist just has a great presence, and their songwriting is where their strength really lies. They just have a way to really lock a user and sort of suck them in and make them very hypnotically attracted to all of the material that they put out. And this is once again true with Clairvoyant. Number 19, we have Ne Obliviscarus with Earn. Yes, this was a really, really hard follow-up for them, considering Citadel was an Album of the Year winner. But Earn was able to do a lot of things right while still maintaining some of Citadel's veneer, but also pushed forward just a bit. However, it was just still something that feels a little bit like there were some building blocks there. There was some development that was still happening, and based off of that, it did get a little bit of a hit. Not to mention, there's a lot of other great albums that were released that just felt a lot more massive, a lot more big, and a lot more important than this album. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. Earn still really is able to just churn through its tracks and showed why Ne Obliviscarus is one of the most identifiable bands of this era, and why so many people have attached themselves to them, because they have a lot of great charm and a lot of great material within their rank, and it's something that's only going to continue. The bag of tricks is only going to expand even wider, and I think that's what makes this band kind of such an intriguing follow. Number 18 is Mastodon with Emperor of Sand. Speaking of bands that did things just a little bit differently, Mastodon decided to go the concept album routes and decided to go very personal with it. And while this album does have certain flaws every once in a way, this is also an album that is filled with a lot of strong material and has one of the best final cuts on an album this year in Jaguar God. That song just is an absolute perfect ending for an album that was able to really harangue you through many different emotions, many different feelings, and Mastodon is a group that never feels like they rest on their laurels. Is this crack the sky? Absolutely not. But in its own way, Emperor of Sand has its own importance in this world. Number 17, Bell Witch with Mirror Reaper. Just 2 tracks. Just 2 tracks. This is epic. This is atmospheric. This is doom. This is death metal. This is whatever you want to call it. This album is just a crawl. It is a dirge. And it is honestly one of the most intriguing albums of this year, considering throughout all of that, you cannot really turn away from it. You don't want to turn it off. You are actually wondering with each passing moment, even if that moment, that minute that you just went through was just like the previous 3. You want to know where this is going. You want to know where this is going to go, and you remember instantaneously where you'd already been. This is an album that commits itself to your memory. It's one that really stays with you long after you leave. And that's what makes it such an identifiable and such a positive record this year. Bell Witch has made a name for themselves. Now it is their duty to try to follow up Mirror Reaper with something that pushes the envelope just that much further. But along the same lines, number 16, The Ruins of Beverest with Exuvia. Oh my God! If you want to talk about a band that came out of nowhere the first part of this year and really impressed a lot of people, and it's to the point where I feel like some folks forgot about this album whenever December hit, which is a real shame because this was a great album to start off the first half of 2017. This is once again a doom-style band that is able to show a little bit of a progressive side or show a little bit of an experimental side, a little bit of an avant-garde side. And right from the get-go, you are assaulted with 14, 15-minute-long tracks. And then even whenever they descend down to just 8-minute-long songs, all of these all feel like they have a uniqueness to it, an individuality to them. So each song doesn't feel like it is trying to surpass the other. It's instead using its own strengths and using its own charm in order to try to make a consistent album, which is exactly what Exuvia was, and exactly why Exuvia is as high on this list. It's a really hypnotic listen, and similar to Bell Witch, it's a hard release to put down. Number 15 is Dune, or Divine, D-V-N-E. There's been a debate about this all year with Asherin, and I love what this band does. If you like Mastodon, you're going to really dig these guys. If you like sludge metal and a little bit of stoner metal or a stoner rock, you're going to really love these guys. If you like a couple bands that we're going to be talking about a little bit later on in this list, you're going to absolutely love these guys. If you've been to a CKN stream, chances are you've heard these guys. This is an absolutely fantastic album, and it's one from a group that is really just starting to get off of their feet and start to really circulate themselves into the world of music. And they have sort of done like an Abstract Illusion did last year. They have just come out of nowhere and delivered an absolute masterpiece right out of the gate. And these guys are still working on new material, as is an Abstract Illusion, so 2018 is looking good. But I think that this is one of those make these guys famous style scenarios. You guys need to hear this music. You guys need to hear these guys, and you guys need to make them famous. Let them know that they are appreciated. Let them know that they are loved. They are at number 15 for a damn good reason. Number 14 is Fen with Winter. Oh my gosh. I mean, whenever I first discovered these guys, I thought that they were going to be a pretty decent group, but I did not expect an album to the degree of Winter, which really just was able to sprawl itself and deliver an atmosphere that felt like the season itself. The season that we are currently in is one that has desolation that's to it. There's an emptiness to it, but there is also still a lot of material here just to soak up and just really become one with. There is some avant-garde material in there, some experimental work. There is death metal. There is progressive. There is a lot to digest here. Fans of Agalok will really like this. If you really dug Winter's Gate from Insomnium, I think that Fen is a fantastic sort of follow-up to it to stay with the winter theme. Great stuff. Number 13, Steven Wilson with To the Bone. And this is an album that shows that Steve was willing to be a little bit more diversified with this one. He didn't go for the concept album idea and really embraced a lot of 80s power prog pop whenever he was doing some of the material work that this album really encompassed. And I like the fact that that made it very different sounding, but I also like the fact that the consistency of a track such as Pariah immediately had that big-time single feel, and actually has become a huge single not only because of this album, but because of its inclusion along with other Steven Wilson works in the game Last Day of June, which is currently available on Steam, and I highly recommend to each and every one of you guys because it looks absolutely beautiful. But this is an album that shows a different side of Steven Wilson that was always there and was always kind of making itself known every now and again, but got its proper showcase on this release, and also got its proper showcase in the form of its sort of merging with some of his other sounds to create something a little bit different. Definitely not his best album by any stretch of the imagination, but still really powerful, and for that reason it's at number 13. Number 12 is Ulver with The Assassination of Julius Caesar. Assassination. I sound like Sean Connery whenever I say something like that, and even then, that was a horrible impression. But either way, this album was not what you would expect from Ulver either. There's a little bit of dance in here, a little bit of electronica. There's a little bit of what makes Ulver so absolutely distinct and unique, which is longer tracks that sort of bow into different sides of the music universe, and not just necessarily the heavy metal universe. If you remember their album from last year, which, good luck remembering the title, how they dove into sort of the live atmosphere and just decided to record some brand new things and put it together into a sequence or an order, and we got great tracks such as Ecclesiastes. This is similar to what they do, only they go in a completely different direction with it, and that's what makes Ulver and a band like Boris just really interesting and fantastic bands to just get into and love, considering you never know what you're going to get from them, but it seems like with every single experiment that they try, they're immediately good at it because they just have a great sense of music itself, but also an even better sense of their own sound, their own capability, and what and where they want to go with it. So that's what makes The Assassination of Julius Caesar so absolutely fantastic. A track such as So Falls the World is just a brilliant example of what makes Ulver such a hypnotic band. Scope this one out. I can't recommend this enough. Number 11, And Full Darkness with Adversary Omnipotent. Whenever this dropped in July, right before the tragedy of the loss of one of their members, this album was just, oh my god, it was like a steamroller to the face. It was a band that decided to take the concept of, a lavish opera and transform it into technical death metal that went a little bit further into the more progressive atmosphere and really put the cherry on top of just fantastic musicianship that just felt like you were being blinded by more than just riffs. You were being blinded by the whole entire package. Think about what Rings of Saturn kind of did this year, how they took that technical, insanity and decided to slow things down a little bit and give it a little bit more atmosphere, a little bit more collective effort, toward not having everything be based simply around speed. And you get what In Full Darkness does with every track all the time. that's what they are. That's the kind of band that they are. They're a group that uses every single tool in their toolkit in order to craft just bonkers songs, but also uses their musicianship in order to craft just fantastic, overall frameworks and just terrific, terrific experiences. That's the best way that I could really give this album one single word review, is that it's an experience. Number 10, Daydream 11 with the Circus of the Tattered and Torn. This is a band that almost slipped under so many people's radars if it wasn't for a couple of folks in the nation actually bringing it to my attention, and after that the rest is history. This is one of the best prog albums of the year. It is not the best, but it is one of them that is really up there. It is a huge story that is based around of a lot of individuals that have some very big dreams or problems, hence the title, The Circus of the Tattered and Torn. And it is one where the execution of this is just so wonderful. Think about all the things that The Astonishing was not. Cohesive. It felt like that it was able to really keep you strung along. It wasn't something that needed to have like just a bunch of 3-minute tracks in order to have you feel like you're going from chapter to chapter. Instead, it could go 7 minutes here, 15 minutes here. You could just kind of do what you want and paint by number, and it just felt cohesive. And that's exactly what this album was. And not to mention, whenever it came to musically, and whenever it came to vocally, whenever it came to the presentation, wow. I mean, this is just an album that knocks all of those different elements out of the park and delivers an experience once again, similar to what we just said about Unfold Darkness. This is an experience that definitely needs to be experienced by progressive music fans and really just metal fans in general. Once again, this is another band that if you've been to the CKN streams right here on YouTube that are soon going to be over on Twitch, you heard a lot of Daydream 11 within the past month and a half ever since this album was discovered, and it's one that immediately got itself a place on this list. Speaking of great prog, though, with number 9, we have Arion with The Source. Now, we know that Arjen Anthony Lucanson has the greatest of abilities to make just phenomenal story-based albums, and The Source is, once again, a prime example that he just continues somehow, some way to get better at it, and that's just kind of not fair. The Source is just a sprawling album that delivers so many keynote moments and is, once again, just Arjen getting so many great and talented individuals together in order to just throw together a wonderful album that early on this year felt like an early candidate and an early frontrunner for an album of the year style list. And Arion, if you're not familiar with these guys, if this is not a band that you felt like you've ever had the ability or the tenacity to jump in and become very close to or try out or scope out, just take the leap. That's all I'm going to say. It's like jumping into the deep end of the pool for the very first time. You might as well just do it because you're just going to keep thinking about it and it's going to drive you batshit. The Source is actually a pretty good album for you to scope that out and try things out with this band. And I have a feeling that once you do that, especially if you're on that Amazon page, you're going to find yourself going back the next day or so after you get it, and you're going to be clicking as many of the other albums as you can possibly get your hands on, because it's just such a fun experience. Number 8 is Soen with Lycaea. This is awesome material, man. This is Martin, who of course used to be in Opeth. He is now a part of this group, and his inclusion has just made them all the better, although they were already pretty damn good to begin with. Imagine what new Opeth would sound like if it had a little bit more of an edge and ass to it. And then consider a band such as Leprous, consider a group such as Haken, and all of it sort of comes together. Speaking of, the new Leprous album did not make this list, which is kind of amazing. And there's another album that didn't make this list, sadly, because there's only 40 spots, and damn. Witherfall with their brand new one, Nocturnes and Requiems. It was a phenomenal album. Hell, you could throw it in right here if you want. But Soen with Lycaea just delivers such great musicianship, and the whole entire album's cohesion makes it a very simple and smooth listen from the first to the final track. And that's why this album is as high up on the list as it is. Not only is it a very intoxicating listen where you want to go through the entire thing, but also the material that's presented is just so wonderfully done. And the album review of this really paints the picture all the more, although I think that it became a little bit more of a sleeper hit as time went on, considering the more that you listen to this album, the better it actually sounds and the better it actually becomes, which is very rare for many albums, not only this year, but just in general. Number 7, we have Persephone with Athma. And speaking of albums that just seem to get better with each and every listen, this is one that kind of fulfilled that same doctrine, but not quite within the same realm of imagination. I would say if you gave this another month, Soen and Persephone's spots on this list may have been flip-flopped, but, that's timing. Persephone still released a phenomenal disc this year, and it was one that showed that this group has not only progressive in mind, but a little bit of power in mind, but a little bit of just overall metal in mind. They have a great sense of purpose, not to mention a great sense of themselves, and like some of the other bands that we have discussed so far this afternoon, they are a group that knows their capabilities and knows where they want to go with things, and because of that, there's a certain confidence that is exuded from this music, and there's a certain confidence that is exuded from this album, something that shows that it is going to be bigger than what they've done in the past, which they already were a pretty well-respected band going in. However, now it was even bigger, and it had even more of a sort of a chip on its shoulder, considering they had to prove themselves to be able to continuously deliver great material, and they knocked it out of the ballpark with Athma. Great disc. Number 6, speaking of amazing discs, we have Enslaved with E. This is a very simple title, and an album that is not simple whatsoever. Enslaved easily could have rested on their laurels and done the same style of album that they've done since maybe 2009. Which was built off of the stuff that they had been doing since, say, 1999 with Monumention, or Below the Lights in 2001. But no, they decided that's way too easy. We're not going to do that. We're instead going to go with an album that is probably one of our most adventurous, most prog-centered, or most folk / heathen-centered albums of our history. And we are going to make this extremely personal and really ride that heathen hammer high. And it's going to be our most creative effort. That's exactly what they did. This late in their career, a career that has been around since the first part of the 1990s, they have decided, you know what, we don't want to do the same thing over and over again. And so we have E. And because of that, E is an absolutely smashing album. It is one that feels like maybe their best. And that's really hard to determine, considering albums such as Monumention exist. Albums such as Below the Lights exist. Albums such as Axima Ethica Odine exist, which was an album of the year, by the way. To say that E might be better than that kind of makes you reconsider that year, or it just kind of makes you think about why one album could be better than the other. It's crazy. We might have to do a rank them all and try to seriously determine this. But either way, E, phenomenal. That's why it's at number 6. Number 5, Kreator with Gods of Violence. Finally, we got the follow-up, The Phantom Antichrist, and it was everything that we were hoping for, and actually a little bit more. Now, while it's not a number 1 album like Phantom Antichrist was, some might actually say that Gods of Violence may have been the better album out of the two of them. I slightly disagree, mostly because the one thing that Gods of Violence was not going to ever have, because it's just impossible to have, is the same surprise factor that Phantom Antichrist was able to really deliver. We had expectation for Gods of Violence, and that might be the only thing that really gave it any sort of sway one way or the other. Phantom Antichrist delivered that shock value whenever we got there of it being so solid and so amazing, whereas Gods of Violence just simply proved that, hey, Kreator wasn't a one-trick pony, they're going to do it again. And of course they're not a one-trick pony, they've been around since the 80s. They know how to write an album, and they took their time. They took a long period of time in order to make sure that they got it right, and they certainly did. It's number 5 this year. Number 4, another thrash album, Havoc with Conformicide. This album is just a little bit better than Gods of Violence because Havoc is proving themselves to be very capable songwriters that continue to evolve, improve, and get better. And because of that, this album is as high up as it is. It's one that came out of nowhere in the sense that we knew that Havoc were talented, but we were unsure that they were going to be able to reach some of the heights of perhaps some of their peers from the past. And Conformicide proved that they have every capability and every sense about them to really write not only very talented thrash metal, but also very thoughtful and very current thrash metal. Thrash metal that feels like it has more of a purpose than just being there. It also is trying to tell a story and has that angst and that anger that perhaps has made thrash the favorites of so many people throughout the years. That brings us to number 3, which is Paul Bearer with Heartless. The album that, unfortunately, is the highest on this list that did not get a review, and it's definitely a regret of mine, but it's okay. Things happen. Paul Bearer's Heartless is just an absolutely devastating work of doom that has a lot of talent that's put behind it. It has space, it has time, it has a lot of atmosphere, but it also has some of those crushing riffs that are necessary for a style such as this. Last year we talked about this band, and we talked about their ability to do covers very well, including a Typo Negative song. That should be your first indication that this band is pretty freaking awesome. And then, with Heartless coming out, it was absolutely solidified, and it was beaten into the foreheads of just about anybody who listened to this album that this is the group. Such as Death Heaven a couple of years ago was the group of that time. Pallbearer is the group of the now, or at least one of them, because we still have two more people that we need to talk about. Two more bands that you certainly need to scope out if you haven't already. We go to number 2, which is Threshold with Legends of the Shires. This is a double album. I don't know if we've had a double album perform this well on an album of the year list, but if we have, then it now has really good company. Because this album for Threshold, they go all the way back to one of their original vocalists from the psychedelic era of the 1990s, and they deliver a 2-disc album that has literally no stinkers on it. Dream Theater, please, take a lot of freaking notes if you ever decide to do a double album again. Listen to Legends of the Shires. Listen to Legends of the Shires. Listen to Legends of the Shires. You can take notes from this band. Yes, you, Dream Theater, can actually take notes from this band, because this is how you just design an album. This is how you write an album. And this is how you have each and every piece of material on here not feel like it's overshadowing the other, not feel like it's trying to outshine the other. It's instead, everything feels like it is complementing one another and just making the album better overall. And both discs do that. There's only maybe one song on this album that I would say didn't do that, and it barely didn't do it as well as the other songs. So, is that really even a complaint? Not really. Maybe it just means that they were sick that day. This album is just an anomaly. It's kind of an anomaly, and Threshold has been a band that I've followed now for about 16 years, really since about 2001. To see them evolve and grow and then have this album come, it has that same shock factor as being a fan of Kreator for a long time and then hearing Phantom Antichrist. So you can kind of understand that whenever you followed some of these groups for just ages, and then you hear such a solid and amazing release from them, something that even you kind of doubted a little bit was a possibility. It is so nice to hear, and it immediately causes you to want to tell other people. And the best part about it was that this was an experience that a lot of you guys out there in the nation and I got to share together, considering this album was listened to on a stream for the very first time. And it only got better with subsequent listens afterward. It was constantly an album that we constantly had requests coming in to hear during the streams. So you know that it's good. But that brings us to number one. Number one, and the album of the year for 2017. For many of you, it's already become very obvious. It's been obvious for a while. Elder with their album Reflections of a Floating World. Now this is the only album that I think got the 30 out of 30 score this year, and if it didn't, then it was a 29 out of 30. It doesn't really matter. I would give it I'd give it a 99 or a 100 right now if we were doing it out of 100. It really doesn't matter, because this is just, oh my gosh, the number of times that I've listened to this album this year is absolutely absurd. It's probably in the 100s. This is a group that takes doom or stoner metal or sludge or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter at this point. It throws some prog in there, and just the riffs upon the riffs upon the riffs. Everything feels like it's not only in its right place, but it also feels like it is setting up the next idea, which is what music should be. That's what music is all about. You think that's the definition. But so many bands seem incapable of piecing together those types of ideas and those types of great structures on a consistent basis throughout albums. Elder seems to do this in their sleep, and does so with a high level of respectability, not to mention a high level of intelligence, considering every single note on this album feels very carefully crafted and in place for good reason, and every song on this disc feels like it is the most immense and largest thing that they have ever done to date. But I will say this, that the best opening song of this year goes to Sanctuary off of Reflections of a Floating World. There has been no song I've listened to more this year. I'll just toss that out there. There's been no song that I have listened to more times casually, or in stream, or just to do it, or in my car, or heard in my sleep. The song is phenomenal. The album is phenomenal. Elder, congratulations. You have gone from being a band that I discovered with your last album, which is Lore, just a couple of years ago, and being floored by that disc, to now being an Album of the Year champion with Reflections of a Floating World. Thank you for delivering us this fantastic album. And thank you also not only to the 39 other bands that are on this list, but to so many other groups that are out there that have released phenomenal discs this year that perhaps were missed by this list, or missed by my ears, or maybe missed by your ears. There's been a lot of great music in 2017, and it continues to show. And 2018 definitely aims to be just as good, if not better. We are in a great era right now, ladies and gentlemen. So, what I want you to do is that in the comments below, I want you to give me your top 40 list. Okay, that might be a little bit too much. Give me your top 10. What are your top 10 albums of this year? Let me know in the comments below. And once again, thank you to everybody for another great year of Cover Killer Nation. Even though there wasn't as many reviews this year, we're looking to change things up a little bit in 2018. So, well, we're already here. So, I was about to say I'll see you then, but I will continue to see you here. Have a good one. Take care.